I'm really bad at publicizing my stuff, and I'm getting better. And there's more information out there now on doing publicity. So when I started, well, forever there have been lots of how to write books, and there are good ones, and good ones keep coming along. But how to market your stuff, how to publicize, how to get your name out there. There have been very few of those books over the years. The first one I'm aware of is Book Life by Jeff Vandermeer, which taught me a lot of things. And just recently, there's some sort of professional organization of literary agents. I forget what it's some acronym. And they have come out with best practices for publicizing your work. If anybody wants me, it's public. It's not like it's secret stuff. So if anybody wants me to email a copy, just let me know, give me your email address, and I'll email a copy when I get home. That's got useful stuff, and it's up to date too. Obviously, things change and change a lot in recent years, so I hope they'll keep that document up to date. But how to use social media and so on to get your name out there. So I wish I had known some of that stuff, and I will have to do more of it. I'm very interested in writing. I'm not interested in a lot of the other things one has to do, but I should just grit my teeth and do it. Other things that I wish I had known when I was starting out. Not a lot, actually. It's just, how to write well, and that's stuff that takes time. I could talk about some of my ideas about writing well. When I first was invited to come here, I was told, it's an hour, do whatever you want, and I thought that meant I had to give a talk or something like that. So I have a half-formed PowerPoint here of things that I could talk about if nobody asks questions, but I would rather answer questions as we go along. Yeah?
Your writing seems to have a fair bit of humor in it. How do you make sure that really pops on the page?
Well, you want to pass it by other people, right? See if they laugh, see if they get the jokes, and try to tune them. One of the things about humor is that not everybody is going to laugh, and it's very immediate if people don't think it's funny. I started out not before I was writing prose, but I did plays, and I did improv, and there's real immediate feedback. If people don't think it's funny, it's painful to sit in the theater. So I got a lot of practice with writing and stuff for theater, and that translates in some ways into prose. I recommend, if you're interested, especially if you're interested in writing funny stuff, take an improv class. There's a book called Impro by Keith Johnstone. Probably he pronounces it Johnson, but it's spelt Johnstone. And he was actually associated with Loose Moose Theater here in Calgary. I don't know if Loose Moose is still around or not. It is, yeah. So he was kind of the spiritual godfather of Loose Moose. And Impro is a great book on improvisation, and also on, so a lot of the principles of improvisation are equally good for writing in general. So he talks about shifts in status, who is on top, who's underneath, what the effect of switching is. He talks about principles of making stories and so on, putting things together. A really, really important thing is the idea of reincorporation. Comedians call this callback, but if bringing something back that has already been done really makes people feel as if the story is holding together. And it's really a matter of luck. So if I reach a point in a story where I don't know what I'm going to do next, or I have a problem, the characters have a problem, and I haven't thought of a way for them to solve it, I always say, what have they already got to play around with? And almost always they've got stuff with them. So every time you describe someone going into a room, you pretty much have to describe the room, right? And you describe, it's got X, Y, and Z. So if there's a problem in that the characters are facing a problem in the room, you've already described stuff that's in the room. And it's not like you deliberately put some solution object in the corner. You're just describing a room, right? And probably when I describe a room, I want to make it somewhat interesting, so I put interesting things in the room, but not so totally weird that it's going to feel like it's really convenient that the room had that, because I literally did not know that was going to have a plot purpose when I originally described the room. I just said, what could be in this sort of room? Okay, there's one of those. So I very often, me from 3 days ago left me today a wonderful gift that I can use and don't have to think hard about. Yes?
Well, okay, as a reader, I remember I read the Festina Ramos Expendable books,
Mm-hmm.
and then there seemed like there was a long gap before the Spark books came out. So
Yes.
What happened in that?
So they didn't want any more Festina books. They didn't sell the last one, the last few didn't sell great.
Those dirty rotters, I like them.
Yes, I like them too, but they weren't, sales were petering out, and so it took me a while to come up with a new set of things that would sell. In that gap, I wrote a number of books, but they didn't sell. And, that's kind of the way that writing works these days. Rob Sawyer and I, at 4 o'clock, so an hour from now, are going to talk about the modern publishing industry. And there's lots of things that you get a chance or two and then you're out. And towards the late 90s, a lot of the 1990s, a lot of the publishers were bought out by much larger publishing companies, and new rules came in, and slowly the suits took over from the editors, and that's where we are today, and some weird and wonderful things happen. Simple example, I could talk about this. I was at VCon in Vancouver last year, and Charlie Strauss talked about his problems with the laundry files. So for one reason, his laundry files books used to come out in October, and for one reason or another, a book was shifted to July. And the suits had this rule that if your sales, they looked at the first 3 months of sales on each book, and if your sales went down in the first 3 months, they decided that you were on the descent and wouldn't buy anything more from you. Well, a book that comes out in October gets the Christmas sales rush, right? So it's going to sell more. A book that comes out in July gets nothing special. So his sales went down, not because anyone disliked his books or anything like that, but he just didn't get the Christmas boost. And so he was dumped by that publisher. And now the laundry files are published by a different publisher who isn't quite so, stupid. Okay, I'm going to, supposedly I'm supposed to do a reading. So I'm going to do a little bit from a work in progress called, this is a short story, although it's probably more like a novella, that I'm calling Malvana the Master, Aurora, and Sue. Once upon a time, there was a fairy named Malvana. She wasn't evil, but just as some humans don't much like dogs, Malvana didn't much like humans. She didn't hate them or want to see them suffer. She just didn't care to be around them. Humans, of course, misinterpreted Malvana's feelings. They believed she was thoroughly, irredeemably wicked. Bards wrote songs with Malvana as the villain, and parents told their children, "Behave, or Malvana will get you." It was therefore no surprise that when the queen gave birth to a daughter, she and the king didn't want Malvana at the christening. They couldn't say what Malvana might do to the baby, since many good fairies would be in attendance. However, the king and queen still feared she would cause trouble. They firmly agreed Malvana shouldn't be invited to the child's naming party. The royal master of protocol ignored them. He had trained for many years under the kingdom's previous master, and he'd studied numerous annals from faraway places. More importantly, the master of protocol was a man of common sense. He considered it obvious that snubbing a fairy might lead to dire results. If the fairy in question had a prickly disposition, that only made prospects worse. So the master sent Malvana a courteous invitation, written with his own hand on the finest royal parchment. He addressed her with compliments, but didn't lay it on too thick. His letter noted there was a modest tradition of fairies bestowing magical blessings upon firstborn children, if the fairies enjoyed that kind of thing. But of course it was completely Malvana's choice. If she wanted suggestions for what sort of blessing would be appropriate, the master would be honored to offer a list. The king and queen were aghast when they learned what the master had done. They insisted he rescind the invitation at once. The master, however, pointed out that if there was anything more unwise than snubbing a fairy to begin with, it was insulting her by withdrawing the invitation. If Malvana was as evil as rumor suggested, did the king and queen really want to provoke her anger? Would it not be more prudent to show her some deference? The king and queen remained displeased, but they grudgingly agreed what's done is done. Secretly, however, they met with the royal vizier to devise a plan for finessing the situation. The vizier was not a man of common sense. He was, unfortunately, clever. The day of the party arrived, the palace filled with noble guests from all around the kingdom, and even from foreign lands. A dozen fairies were also in attendance. Each took on the facade of a beautiful human woman, because custom required men to dress with monochrome restraint, whereas women could wear whatever they damn well pleased, which the fairies did with gusto. Even Malvana chose to clad herself in garments of multicolored excess. She was not at all relaxed in the company of humans, and several times before the party she said, "I'll just stay home." But the invitation had impressed her. The humans were clearly attempting to be respectful, even if they lacked the natural eloquence of fairies. Malvana likened them to puppies, yapping and slobbering, but in this case at least, they seemed to have good intentions. So Malvana attended the party in a gown of crimson and gold. Many people turned pale when they learned who she was, but the Royal Master of Protocol came to greet her with a bow. He welcomed her warmly and engaged her in conversation for several minutes, asking her opinion on various matters in the Seelie and Unseelie courts, then thanking her for enlightening him on those issues. Afterward, Malvana couldn't help smiling a little. The master was a shameless suck-up, but he played the part with charm. The time came for the fairies to grant blessings to the newborn princess. By custom, this usually took place in front of the entire assembly. The guests could then applaud the fairies' generous beneficence. Bestowing the blessings in public also let the fairies hear what boons had already been given by their sisters. Fairies never discussed such things beforehand. They sometimes claimed their magic needed spontaneity, but really they just couldn't be bothered with planning things in advance. Therefore, if the fairies didn't know that one of their number had already granted the princess great beauty, they might all do the same without any of them thinking to grant long life, happiness, many children, a handsome king, and other traditional favors conferred on girls. But this time, the king announced that the blessings would take place behind closed doors. One by one, each fairy would be led to the princess's nursery. They would bless the little girl, and when they emerged, the royal vizier would loudly proclaim what gift had been given. Most people considered it odd to deviate from time-honored ways. In particular, the master of protocol voiced his strong misgivings. But the king and queen insisted, and since the master had no concrete reason for why the newfangled way wouldn't work, he finally acquiesced. The master consoled himself with the thought that the fairies would still hear what gifts had already been given. This would avoid slip-ups, like the time in the neighboring kingdom when 3 fairy godmothers had given the same girl raven black tresses, locks of shining gold, and hair as red as flame. Luckily, that had only led to the fad of every lady in the kingdom dyeing her hair 3 different colors. But everyone realized it might have been worse. Deciding which fairy went ahead of which was dealt with in the usual manner of fairies, chaotically, with ferocious arguments over who had gone first the last time, who owed whom a favor, and who had traded away their claim to precedence 73 years ago in exchange for a changeling boy. The humans, even the vizier, knew better than to get involved. They simply waited as the fairies ranted, drew lots, conducted duels, and paid each other off until an order was finally agreed upon. As fate would have it, Malvana ended up last. The master of protocol wondered if she'd wanted this all along. During the fairies' disputes, Malvana hadn't fought very hard to push ahead of anyone. The master found himself watching Malvana more closely than he watched Malvana's sisters. Something about her had caught his attention. And now and then, in the bickering, he thought she might be watching him especially, too. The fairies began their solo trips to the baby's nursery. The first gift was, as always, superlative beauty, this time embellished by flowing golden hair. Thereafter followed poise and grace, a long life of health and splendor, an honorable mention, marriage filled with love and obedience, yada, 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 Malvana muttered. I beg your pardon, asked the master of protocol. Oh, nothing, Malvana replied, just an old fairy saying. When the others had had their turn, Malvana prepared to enter the nursery. The vizier said, "A moment, please, good lady. The princess has had a digestive event and requires her diapers changed." Malvana wrinkled her nose, but she knew this was common behavior in human infants. Might mean an irksome delay, but it had no significance. Well, alas, she was wrong. While Malvana waited outside the door of the nursery, the princess was taken away, and in her place, a different child was laid in the crib, the newborn daughter of a scullery maid. This happened according to the vizier's plan. One baby looks much like another, and several serving-class girls had been born within a few days of the princess. The vizier picked the baby with the closest resemblance to her highness, then ordered a nursemaid to wash the child and wrap her in royal linen. Once the base-born girl was nestled in the princess's crib, Malvana would never know the difference. Why the deception? Because the king and queen were certain Malvana would curse the child instead of blessing her. Despite the other fairy gifts of long life and contentment, the royal parents feared Malvana would doom the girl somehow to die young or become a barren invalid. As the vizier had said, if someone is going to get cursed, let it be a commoner instead of the princess. That way no one important gets hurt. As noted, the vizier thought himself clever. Great lady, said the vizier, you may now go in. Malvana entered the nursery. She went to the crib and laid her hand on the little girl's forehead. The other fairies had offered pleasantries. Oh, what a sweet little child. I'm so happy to share her special day. But Malvana got straight to the point. Using her free hand to gesture, Malvana intoned, may this child rule the kingdom wisely through many years of peace and prosperity, beloved by all her people, and choosing freely what path she walks. Let it be so. Magic burst from Malvana's hand, flowing into the baby and making her shine like the sun at midday. As the light soaked into the little girl's skin, Malvana whispered to her, there, at least someone gave you something useful. But when Malvana turned to the king and queen, their eyes were wide with horror and their jaws had flopped open. Oh, come on, said Malvana. I was trying to be nice. And so that does turn into Sleeping Beauty with 2 girls instead of 1, and exciting things. Heaven knows when I'll finish that, let alone when it will show up, but there, a work in progress. I always love going to cons to hear works in progress. So it feels like I'm a little bit ahead of the game. Anyway, questions, comments? Yes?
You mentioned it could possibly become a novella. How are the markets for novellas?
Surprisingly good. Tor.com now has a line of novellas. To be frank, a small book like that with a cool idea is something that I'm more likely to pick up than, the big honking 300,000 word fantasy. And the books by Tor.com in particular, they're going strongly for diversity. So LGBT, people of color, different takes on folklore, so not the standard, kind of folklore we're all used to, mythology, fantasy, but also science fiction and so on. If you haven't read the Murderbot series, Murderbot it's science fiction, and Murderbot is a security robot who can sort of pass for human, but has absolutely no interest in being human whatsoever. Murderbot somehow blew out its control chip. So it is no longer under programming orders to do good things. Not that it murders people much. In fact, all it really wants to do is watch the 25th century equivalent of soap operas. But it's really a lovely creation. The first one is All Systems Red. The writer is Martha Wells, and there have been 4 in the series. The first one won, I think, both the Hugo and the Nebula. At least it won one of those last year. And anyway, I strongly recommend the Murderbot series and the Tor.com novella series in general. And because Tor.com novellas have been doing so well, the novella market has picked up. So there are a number of publishers that are now bringing out novellas in just standard format. They apparently sell really well, and certainly there's a good feeling about them. I go through our local library and just pull out any Tor.com novella I find. I haven't read a loser yet. Yeah.
So if writing short stories, novels, and maybe novellas have different skills,
Mm-hmm.
and you're good at all of them, where in the process do you decide that as a short story or a novella?
I don't plan a whole lot ahead. I know kind of where the story is going, partly because it is the Sleeping Beauty story. But I wanted to do a Sleeping Beauty story where some of the characters are actually sane. So Malvana and the Master are, actually not irrational, and they quietly have a fling start to go in the background, and the two girls, the commoner baby and the princess, again, because the Master and Malvana are sane, they persuade the king and queen not to try to kill the commoner child who has been blessed to rule the country, because that never works, right? You try to kill the kid, and whoever's assigned to it decides, oh, I can't really kill them, and the kid then gets brought up by the shepherd, and 16 years later, there's the Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. So if you actually raise them together so that they like each other and they're best friends and they don't want to hurt each other, and they're happy with the way the kingdom is, then maybe things will work out better. But there is the vizier there, who unfortunately is clever and is the villain of the piece, who propels things into Sleeping Beauty land. The idea of what I'm just going to give away the story. Why not? Through one mechanism or another, the commoner girl is the one who takes the spinning wheel and goes to sleep supposedly for 100 years, and it's actually the princess who has to kiss the commoner to wake her up, which appeals to me a great deal. And anyway, lots of stuff there happening. So I wanted to write a fairy tale where people are not complete fools throughout the whole thing. Questions, comments? Yes?
When's the next superhero novel out, and what's the title?
The title is Nobody Told Me You Could Break the Moon. It's Miranda's story, and it's going to take a while. So, alas, the Tor has not contracted for any more. So that's probably going to end up being self-published, which is why I am working on other things. I am going to write it. I am going to write the last two of those because I'm enjoying them a great deal, and I don't want to leave a series unfinished, unlike certain people we know. Who I don't blame a bit. But I didn't pay him however much Tor paid him to get that final book. I don't think George R.R. Martin owes it to me to make the book, but I understand why other people want to hear the rest. Anyway, I am going to finish the series, but it will take a while. Right now, I am working on a haunted house book, which I'm calling The Hacking of Hill House. And Hill House with a Y, because when this Hill House was made, first of all, I don't want to get sued. And so the gist of this Hill House is that when the first book, The Haunting of Hill House, came out, some not very responsible multimillionaire decided to make his own haunted house, and beyond expectation succeeded, and created a version of Hill House that is in fact thoroughly haunted. And so the book takes place in the modern day, so 50-some years after the Haunting of Hill House was published in '59. So that's 60 years. And tech bros decide that they're going to go ghost hunting in Hill House. Do people know who Martin Shkreli is? He's not a computer guy, he's a pharmaceutical guy, but he's a particularly repugnant affluenza rich guy. And the idea of him being inside a haunted house and thinking he can get the better of it appeals to me no end. It's actually straight. I'll read you the beginning of the story. It is not intended to be a comedy, although it does have some aspects. But to give you the flavor of it. So as I told you, it's Hill House with a Y. This is the opening. Hill House with a Y is not Hill House with an I. Now is not then, we are not them. They feared madness, we fear insignificance. They feared that someone would think they were abnormal. We fear that someone will think we're just ordinary. The first Hill House had no music, no radios, no phonograph, not even a piano. The house had no TV. The only game was chess. The characters never went to restaurants or movies. They had no pets. They didn't keep up with the news. Their only forms of entertainment were books and each other. Living like that today would unsettle us more than facing an army of ghosts. Even a frightening soundtrack is better than silence. Now is not then, we are not them. Our hauntings must be different. So yeah, I've done a lot of studying of haunted house books over the years, and they reflect the fears of their time and the insecurities and so on. So it's interesting to think of, what would scare us today as opposed to what scared them in 1959. Yeah.
Just to ask a question in my mind, Martin Shkreli, was that the guy that was in the news in recent years that got the rights for, I think it was an AIDS medication, and jacked the price through the
Yes,
roof?
yes.
That guy, okay.
That guy. Yeah, he
Represents
jacked the
the
price,
unity.
and famously also was a Wu-Tang Clan fan who
Right.
got the rights to the only record and never released it or anything. No, I mean, to one of their
That one that
albums.
they did, that was the one-off in the special box.
That's right,
Okay,
and
so, yeah,
never
horrible
shared
person.
it.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So the idea of seeing him get his comeuppance is a lot of fun. Yeah.
So regarding fears, as a professional writer, good ideas, good writing, but you have to market it, you have to sell it. Is there a fear of one process over the other?
Of marketing?
Yeah, so are you worried about selling it as a writer? Does that interfere at all?
I'm worried about selling it because it's different from all my stuff, and it has more direct social commentary than anything I'm used to writing, and it's not comedy. It's easy enough to have social commentary if people are laughing. The superhero books, the 1% are monsters and the 99% are the represented by the superheroes, and that's obviously some commentary, but it's got so many laughs in it, who cares? To do it straight is much trickier, and dealing dealing with all the stuff all that genuinely scare us today, that's inevitably controversial territory. And while I steer away from some things because I'm not interested in writing about them, there are some stuff that I do write. So I'm worried about selling it because do I get it right? Yeah, Cliff.
In conjunction with that, are you thinking maybe some authors have an alternate name, you can just use James Gardner to get that job?
Yeah, I would probably put it under a pseudonym.
Alan James Gardner?
No, I would use something completely different. We were talking about last night, no, 2 nights ago, about pseudonyms. How many people here are writers? How many people have ever thought about cool pseudonyms for themselves and what would, yeah. So that is a pretty common thing. Okay, so I'll tell you, if I absolutely needed a pseudonym, what I'm thinking of right now is J.J. Barber. And the reason I go with initials is to just, make gender not an issue. And the reason I go with J.J. Barber, everybody here can spell that, right? Everybody knows where it would be on the shelves, so it's not tricky. And weirdly enough, books by authors at the start of the alphabet sell a lot better than books later on. And heaven knows why that is. Maybe it's because people start at the start of the section and go until they find a book that looks appealing to them. But books by people later, whose names are later in the alphabet, don't sell nearly as well. If you look at a typical fiction section, science fiction or literary fiction, anything like that, A through M is there, and N through Z is there. They're just much more space in the first half of the alphabet than after. And I don't know why that is, but I'm may as well be cognizant of it and use it. Yeah.
I once heard Barbara Kyle say that for her pseudonym, she tries to make it close to really popular authors' last names, so they're close by them on the shelf.
Yeah.
People go looking for them, and then they have to see it.
I certainly think that's why Dean Koontz did as well as he did when he was starting out. I like Koontz's stuff, but he was right beside Stephen King, and he had similar covers, and that sure as heck didn't hurt him.
Dave Wolverton had changed his name. He went to Farland, mainly because there was people like Foster and Feist, and the huge names were all in the F's. And Wolverton wasn't selling at all. And he brought out a fantasy series, and it just took off.
Yeah.
That's what he found it was better to be in the middle.
Yep.
Opposed to people who you would read and pick up one and then pick up another. And say, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it weird what a crapshoot it is? Publishing is a very weird thing, but it hasn't hurt Robert J. Sawyer.
Or Tad Williams.
Or Tad Williams, yeah. So it's not like anything is a guarantee, right? But do as many right things as you can, or as many productive things, positive things as you can, and hope
or you
that.
could marry someone with the last name A. That's what I said.
Sure. I'm not opposed to, taking the name of a spouse if there was enough incentives, but yeah.
So for people looking for you,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't find that book. So is that an actual issue for you?
It might be, yeah. On the other hand, if it's enough dissimilar, it doesn't make a big difference. Another thing that is relevant, because there's so much done by computer algorithms these days. So Charles DeLint also writes mysteries, and he does it under a different name because mysteries just sell a different number than of books than fantasies. I believe mysteries sell a lot more than fantasies. So if they were all under his name, he would, let's say, publish a fantasy, and then he would publish a mystery, and his sales would go up just by the law of averages, and they would say, aha, he's on the way up. And then he would publish a fantasy, and the numbers would go down, again, just by the laws of fantasy, because fantasies don't sell. And people would say, his career's over. We won't buy anything more from him. And that is silly, but that happens over and over again. Let me tell you, some people here probably know Julie Cherneda. And for one of her books, I don't remember which it is, but Chapters ordered 10 copies for each of their stores across the country. And she held a book launch in her hometown of Aurelia. And so, book launch, so they ordered a whole bunch of copies in advance. They set this up months in advance. And Chapters said, oh God, there's a big lump in Aurelia. She must just be of local interest. And they cut orders to all the stores across the country, because that's what their algorithm said. If someone is really popular in one place, well, then she's probably not popular anyplace else, so cut the order. She managed to get that changed, but that's just an example of how weird and wonderful bookstore algorithms are. Questions? Yes? I have a whole bunch of writing stuff. Oh, I'm almost out of... I have a talk on viewpoint that I was going to give, and I have a bunch of samples here on viewpoint that I could read a bit of, but is anybody interested in viewpoint? Does anybody know what writers are interested in viewpoint, right? Yes, writers. So viewpoint. Let me talk a little bit about viewpoint, because it is the key, as far as I'm concerned, to writing. And I'll just take the last little bit. So descriptive passage. Here's my mantra for how to write description. A descriptive passage is the story of a particular character's encounter with a person, place, or thing. First of all, it's a story. So here is, let me, this may take me a second to unearth on my iPad here, but I do have some stuff. So here is, people are tempted to make descriptive passages lists rather than stories. So here is a not bad set of description. The sun rose above a green meadow filled with soft blue cornflowers and yellow black-eyed Susans. Bees hummed from flower to flower. Cows stood munching on clover and staring blankly into the distance. Clouds, which were red with the dawn, gradually turned white as the day brightened. A circle of standing stones, each the height of a man, started to throb with a steady, soft, thudding pulse. Field mice fled from the sound, but a curious fox approached the stones with her ears pricked high. So that's not super bad, but it's a list. It's just a this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing. There's no real point of view. So if I were trying to make it a little bit better, here's a different way to go. At dawn on a late summer's day, a fox emerged from her den and sniffed the air. She smelled field mice and cattle, warm clover too, and the perfume of wildflowers flirting with bees. But the fox didn't care about plants. She wasn't yet hungry, but would be soon. She was old and wise, although as it turned out, not wise enough. Not far away, in the very center of the meadow, stood a ring of gray stones. The fox seldom thought about those stones, except when she slept in their shade if the day grew hot. For some reason, the stones cast cooler shadows than the trees at the edge of the grass. But today the stones caught the fox's interest. They were making a soft thudding sound. It brought to mind her mother's heartbeat from days long ago, when the fox had lain curled up tight against her mother's body. A safe and comforting sound. It drew the fox forward like the scent of fresh meat. And by putting it in the viewpoint of, in this case, a fox, you have kind of something experiencing the story and something paying attention to some things, not paying attention to others. You have a sense of a being there that you can sort of identify with, even though it's not a human. And maybe you feel a little bad about the fox, what's going to happen to the fox. So rather than a list of uninvolving facts, you have a story. And it's a story about a fox, and you feel, you feel that a story is starting and something's going to happen. And the idea of going with some sort of viewpoint is, to me, very important. I'm just looking for examples here. A viewpoint doesn't have to be a character in the story. It can be what we used to call an omniscient narrator, just someone who's observing from the outside. So Malvana, for example, was an omniscient narrator, right? Once upon a time, well, basically someone who sounded like a persona that I was adopting was telling the story. And that's okay too, because we're very used to stories told like that. Basically, what type of stories are we used to? We're used to first-person stories. Hey, this thing happened to me this morning. We hear those stories all the time. And we also hear, once upon a time, there were 3 bears. So both of those forms we're very used to. Probably the most common type of story these days is what we call third-person, tight third person, where we're basically, it's told in the third person but in somebody else's head. Here's an example. Was the grimiest store Stephen had ever seen. Anything that wasn't merely coated in dust was smeared with something brown and sticky. The bottles, the books, even the bargain basement bling looked tarnished or ready to fall to pieces. And the smell, it reminded him of a garden center he'd once visited on the hottest day of summer. The stink from hundreds of plants and sacks of manure, all of them baking under glass in a non-air-conditioned greenhouse. So that's telling the story, but it's also the story of a particular character's encounter with a particular place, and it's telling what he experienced. One of the best writing exercises I've ever had, 2 of them I'll give you from Lucia Shepard. I went to Clarion West in 1989 And one was, for the next week, if you are a writer type, every time you come into a room, pay attention to your experience of the room. What do your eyes actually do as you come in? What do you see? What's the sequence of things? What do your ears actually? Maybe you're more aware of sounds than sights as you come in through the room. If there's a strong smell, maybe that's what happens to you. And your purpose for coming into the room will really affect the experience. So if someone is coming in to this room looking for a friend, what are they going to do? They're going to peek, open the door a crack, just look at faces, and then leave again. They aren't going to pay attention to the decor. They aren't going to pay attention to anything else. The experience of coming into this room will be just looking at the faces, doing a quick check, because that's their purpose. Someone else coming into the room might actually pay attention to the decor. If there was an interior decorator coming into this room, for example, they would actually look at these weird paintings on the wall, which I was completely blind to until, like 10 seconds ago when I started. So what the character's purpose is affects what they see, how they experience, and so just pay attention if you're a writer. Every time you go into a room for the next week, what's your purpose as you come through the door, and then where do your eyes go, what meets your ears, etc., etc. Really useful exercise to get the habit of describing a room, because a room isn't a room. What actually happens is a character's experience of a room, and it is kind of a sequential experience of what goes on, and that's something you can actually put in a story, the sequential experience. You can't put like a snapshot, but you can, he looked there, she looked there, and so on. Thank you all for being here.